My name is Motanyane. What am I now? I'm retired. I was a journalist in my time, but I've reinvented myself many times. I'm a social entrepreneur. I've had a spa. I sit on boards. Yeah, I'm doing what I like. I think the tribute story started in my head. The story of a black publication at the time lived in my head for a long, long time. And then I saw an advert in the paper of a guy called Greg Silos, who had other publications that were talking to the white English-speaking middle class, which was called Living, which was a social upmarket magazine in the North. And then he also started Descartes, and he thought it was a good idea to start a black publication addressing the middle class. Bearing in mind that at the time, the tail end of the 80s, the government had woken up to the fact that they've got to build a black middle class to form a buffer at the time. So I saw this advert and I thought, oh, this is something I'd like to do. And there's a little advert in the Star. So I picked up the phone and I said to him, I don't care what I come to do there, but I want to be part of that. So that's how I came in. And at the time it was still formative, putting together the magazine, putting together the concept. And I think in his mind, it was just supposed to be a social thing, you know, who goes where, riding horses, but I had a different agenda in mind. And then I went to Professor Mpahlela. I prepared my speech, I'd read down Second Avenue, I knew everything I needed to know about him. So I sat in front of him and I started my introduction. This is who I am, and I only said one sentence. And he got it, and he said, I'm in. So yeah, he agreed to come in, and a few of my friends who I'd worked at the Star for 7 years by then, and a few people agreed to come and write. And on the eve of the magazine launched in April, maybe a month before, and people had come to the, I was an unknown at the time, I was just a journalist. And there were all kinds of other people who were prominent, who were wanted to be editors of this publication. I remember at the time, I think Ruel Koza and Gary Murolo had a company called, I can't remember what it is, but it was a media company. So they came to advise the publisher on how can you say tribute magazine? Tribute to who? There's the PAC, there's the ANC. Who are you paying tribute to? So I was in this meeting. They were advising the publisher. Unfortunately, I was called to this meeting. So I had to defend this position of you can honor any black person anywhere. So anyway, it was already April, it couldn't be changed. So the publisher calls me maybe a month before and says, we don't have an editor. What are we going to do? So I said, I've edited the magazine, I will be the editor. So that's how I become the editor of Tribute. And then we got liberated in '94. And then there was wrongly a perception or a challenge which had always been there, that why a black publication? And I think you need courage to answer that question. And you've got to answer that question honestly and courageously. Because if you don't, then you flounder. That it was tribute to black excellence, and then they changed it to tribute to excellence. And then they changed it to another slogan, which means there was a struggle, and you do get a struggle, as you may know, from advertisers or whoever else keeps asking, why the black thing? I mean, forget about the black thing. And I think not only in tribute, I think it's a reflection of broader society. distribution. Those were the main, because as you say, it depended on advertising, and advertisers would say, if a black person wants to buy a BMW and I want to reach them, I already find them in the Star. So what business have I got to advertise in tribute? So yeah, that was very difficult, but also very, very difficult was distribution. How to get to people. You would be in store. First of all, it requires huge amounts of money to do that, and second of all, if it's a small publisher who himself sometimes was looking at it just as black middle class, get the money and run. So he wasn't driven by the same spirit that drove me or the people that we interviewed. But also when the readers began to get it, it was exciting. And we eventually had a platform. We started a tribute forum where we would invite prominent people, not prominent people, people who had the message that we wanted, to come and speak. Mampela Rampela came to speak at the forum, Neville Alexander came to speak at the forum, and it became the place to be seen, or the place to participate in. We had in the magazine we highlighted artists, black artists who were not in the forefront at the time. So we would have an artist each month. I remember Pemba. Pemba was unknown. We did Sekota first, and Pemba contributed in the interview. And then Pemba himself was in PE, not known. I brought him from PE, paid for his ticket, or got the publisher to pay for his ticket. When the Sekota book was launched, he stayed. I had a little flat in Hillbrook. He stayed with me in the flat in Hillbrook, and that's how he started being known again. So yeah, and those are the highlights. And the last forum, before when I left Tribute, the speaker was none other than Thabo Mbeki. He was living in a flat in Hillbrow or whatever. I remember it was, I think, my last month, and I was so terrified he wouldn't come. So I went and camped in his flat for an hour before, and it was he was preparing, getting ready, and Zanele was doing something in the kitchen, and they were talking to each other about what he was going to say. So yeah, that was a highlight. I interviewed Mugabe, and yeah, we developed a good core of writers. We developed a good core of writers. I interviewed Bishop Tutu. I remember that one was called The Day in the Life of. I went to Cape Town. Bishop Tutu was very flexible at the time. We used to run at 5 o'clock in the morning. So got up, ran with Bishop Tutu, came back, sat in his office, spent the day with him. And yeah, there were those. And Winnie Mandela was an interesting interview. It was during the Stompy affair, and to show the credibility that Tribute had at the time, she called. It was all over the place, the Stompy thing, and she called and said she wanted me to interview her. I want you to interview me, I've got a story to tell. So I go off to Winnie and I interview her. Maybe we sit for 2 hours. Stop the press. I managed to stop the press, wait for this interview, and the night before we go to publishing, she calls and says, don't publish. It was about not celebrating fluff. So we used to have meetings, but we had made a decision that our covers are going to speak to the essence of the magazine. So it was very rare that we would have, maybe if you were to model, we'd say it would be like a Vanity Fair as opposed to a Cosmopolitan. Because it is still lifestyle. If you were interviewing, for example, Basitsan, yeah, there's a side of her that is glamorous and whatever, and everybody covers that. But you want to get to the essence of who she is, because there's an I think it's overused, this word, but there's an essence of who she is, and that's what we try to get to. If you interviewed Winnie Mandela, even there's the narrative of a strong woman and it has its place and it lives in one person. But there's also a vulnerable woman. There's also a weeping woman, and that's what you want to bring out. If you interview John Carney, he's a playwright. He tells a story, but there's a black man there who has lived in South Africa, who's lived this life, and that's what you wanted to bring out. What is this person about in this particular country? What message does he bring? He didn't just happen and be successful. There's a whole thing that went on or goes on before he becomes a John Carney. Oh, I love the Winnie Mandela cover. I do. I loved the first cover because it said a lot without saying a lot. You know, it was a glamorous, beautiful black woman, but she was wearing a headgear that was just to die for. And we were very careful also in choosing the cover lineup, what we said in the cover lineup. I like Bishop Tutu. I like the Mugabe cover because Mugabe was a hero at the time, you know. And he had been liberated in 1980 and across the border from us, and he was highly regarded. And he wasn't giving interviews, and he gave me an interview. When I said earlier that the essence of blackness is something that you can feel, I can feel, that unfortunately the people who pay for commercial magazines don't get it. So yeah, and also to get back to your earlier question, what was it about? You know, even now, there's a black people, we have a schizophrenic life. There's a whole lot of our life that is not mainstream. Whether it's our language, whether it's the way we eat even at home, or whether we lobola, or whether we go funerals, that life is not mainstream. We tend to assimilate, and then we have a business life. We have that life that we show in the world. So that, for example, if you speak to white people, they wouldn't, that's why you have that advert, the Sangoma advert, for example. The Sangoma who predicts what? Something. There's an advert now. But they wouldn't think Maud. They'd look at me and they'd form a picture, and they wouldn't think Maud would lobola, you know. Maud would, even go to church and sing and be a Manyano woman, you know. They wouldn't. That life of mine is not mainstream. And I think the challenge for us is to make our life mainstream so that we are not so schizophrenic, that there's still a lot of people who will go to Nyanga or Isangoma or Twasing or whatever. But that life is not the life that you show. And I'm not surprised we're so messed up. And I think the last 20 years, I think it's one of you described it beautifully. We kind of drifted in a direction, maybe justifiably so, and forgot the basics. That we need to regroup, and I think we are, and try and pick up the pieces. And I don't think it's later. As I say, I think the forces are realigning. There's a language, there's a groundswell that I hear and I feel in our conversations. You just have to join the dots. You know, much as I appreciate and I value the way it was, but it is the way it is. And I do wish together we can wake up to the fact that it is the way it is. And that we are faced with a new set of challenges. And it's important to identify what those challenges are, where they're located, so that we're not confused about who the enemy is. We spoke about it earlier, that men think the enemy is the women think the enemy is the men, and older people think the enemy is the young people, and the young people think the enemy is the... And it isn't. And it's not only in South Africa, the world over, we are just living through a revolution of a different kind, and we just need to rise up to it. And I think South Africa can be a great place if we just stop, reflect, regroup, and move on.